Alrighty, what's up, guys? Connor here, and today I just wanted to briefly talk about the things that Warhammer novels get right. Now, I know this is going to be sort of subjective because what I think they get right, a lot of people can think, Connor, that's some foolish reasoning, and I don't agree with you. Totally fair. However, you have stumbled upon my channel, and henceforth you've entered my domain, and I plan to tell you what I think they do really well. So the first thing I've noticed that Warhammer novels tend to do really well is they tend to really nail the human perspective of the stories. Now, again, that could sound like a really gross oversimplification. Connor, the main selling point of, GW and Warhammer in general is Space Marines, which represent humanity. Yes, and that's not really what I'm getting at. I'm trying to get to the point where, specifically in the heresies where I noticed this. Books like Fulgrim did a really, really good job of this, where while Space Marines tend to be the main story and the main driving force, like in a linear fashion of the story, humans can provide more often than not a really good B plot, or in this case are really super important characters who have super pivotal moments that's just, for some reason, to me, really stick out. Like Euphrates Keeler is a super important character in the heresy. She's not a space marine, spoiler alert, she's a human who's been, one of the first acolytes of the Emperor, if you will. And she's just really super interesting and important. The side story, like even, again, I just mentioned Fulgrim. The side stories in Fulgrim were much more, I think, enticing than the space marine part of the story, where Ostian and Serena DeAngelis, the sculptor and the painter, have this love affair that starts off emotional and then escalates to physical, but then she gets corrupted by Slanesh, and there's a lot of emotional turmoil involved in this. And to some people, that's boring, and that's understandable. It could be boring to someone who's really only interested in, like, people like to say, like, bolter porn, which is really just, the violence and massive destruction, void warfare. Those are enticing to me as well. But I think it's super underrated that the human aspect of it really shines through when these authors write the way that they do, and they nail the real genuine, emotion and circumstance that these people have to face in this shitty, grim, dark universe. Because another thing that I think, that they do really well is just balancing the grim darkness and humor, especially in the heresy. I started it thinking, and I was like, Space Marines don't really have a lot of personality. But then this was before I started reading. And then I got into the books, and Tariq Torgatin was immediately pulling up and was spouting jokes and whatnot. Abaddon even exhibits his own personality. They're not all just war machines. They really do have their own, individual quirks and whatnot, even though really Space Marines shouldn't, because they are soldiers and they're hyper, beings of war and conflict, and that's their sole purpose. They do have these very introspective moments. Even Chaos Space Marines have introspective moments and certain appeal. They're all, complex. Authors in novels that I've read recently seem to have a really good balance of making a character super complex, but also keeping that balance of not making them overly sympathetic and overly justified in what they do. Like Talos, for example, if you haven't read the, I don't have it on me, the Night Lord's Omnibus, when you read the books, you think, they're just, they're a merry band of misfits. And then you get to the third story and you realize these people are indeed awful. They're Chaos Space Marines, and human life values so very little to them that it's insane. So again, the third thing was that authors do a really good job of balancing the, amount of edginess and then the amount of genuine, empathy and connection you could have with the character. Like I enjoy Talos as a character, but I also can separate the character from his actions, in which he is a complete and total monster, and as such is a fitting member of the Night Lords. You know what I'm saying? They do really, really good jobs of these balancing acts and whatnot. And I think these authors too, another really good point that I think I want to make, these authors are really good at their specific genres of story. Like, Fulgrim is a really good and tragic story. And then we can pivot to something like Caiaphas Cain, which is still grim and dark, and you see the horrors of the universe and the Imperium and other Xenos. But then you also get the humorous quips of Cain and the imposter syndrome and, you know, all that good stuff. It's comical and it's light and it's fun. So those were just some of the things that I enjoy about, you know, the novels. And I guess I can also talk about some of the things I don't particularly enjoy or things that could be improved. So right off the gate, this is going to be an honorable mention because this is really nitpicky and this isn't really a criticism. Like, Xenos perspectives or you know, when there are Xenos in books and they're not the main focus, they get jobbed so hard. And if you don't know what I mean when I'm referring to like a jobber, think like if you're not into professional wrestling or like anything of that sort, a jobber is someone who gets kind of propped in and just thrown into whatever situation to make the main character look better. So usually this is Eldar or Drukhari or, you know, Chaos Space Marines. Anybody who goes up against the Imperium, Tyranids too, they have someone, let's say they throw in a Swarm Lord, who should be, you know, the epitome of the Tyranids. This is the picture-perfect commander who's acquired millennium of an experience, has killed chapter masters with ease, and he gets soloed or he gets, you know, killed in such a weird comical fashion that it's like, can I even take him seriously anymore? You know, I don't like the jobification of the Xenos, because I may not be an Imperial fan, but that doesn't necessarily mean I can't appreciate their stories, but it also diminishes how people would perceive these other factions when they just constantly get jobbed. Like, people who don't read books and really only get their lore from other YouTubers or Reddit or things of that nature, probably some of them develop this poor perspective of these aliens because they just constantly see them getting jobbed. The Avatar of Cain is also a really good example. The Avatar of Cain is literally propped up in stories to get jobbed. And I'm not the biggest fan of that. But again, that's really like, that's nitpicky. I totally get that. That's super nitpicky. And let's not call that a criticism. Let's just call that that's a Connor expressing a little, you know, discomfort. But I'm not a real, when I read, I don't really go out of my way to find things I dislike. I will say though, here's one thing. Warhammer books, and it just depends on, I think, the author, not the book and the content of the book itself, sometimes have a tendency to drag. So, you know, in the early Heresy, you know, in Horse Rising, Galaxy in Flames, and False Gods, a lot of it's dialogue heavy and it's not as much, you know, focused on campaigns. And if it is, there's a really good balance. But I'm reading Legion right now, and I'm going to be quite frank with you. Trying to get through Legion is horrific. And that may be hyperbole, but ladies and gentlemen, it is so rough. And I've never experienced that before, but sometimes dialogue can be too extensive, and it's just, I don't know how to explain it to you except in the fact that Legion is just so, I'm not going to say it's bad because I'm still literally on the first chapter, but there is such a thing as too much dialogue. And I went online. I wanted to see what other people think, and they thought, oh, okay, this Legion does a really good job of world building, and it introduces the Cabal and John Grammaticus and such. But I can't stand it, and sometimes there is too much dialogue. And another thing I will critique about the Warhammer novels in general, this is more of a broader complaint. So if you're an audiobook listener and and then you kind of flip back and forth from physical copies to audiobooks. I find that the audiobooks can oftentimes be really great and they save a lot of time, but sometimes it's also super hard to follow along with who's talking, which also could be a personal thing where I lose track of who's talking because I'm not paying attention, or I miss something because I was focused and I was taking notes on something else. But audiobooks often, you just really, sometimes it is hard to figure out who is talking half the time, or what is going on sometimes. It's easy to get lost in an audiobook, especially for Warhammer, because I noticed this happening a lot in the Infinite Divine, where Orkin and Trizin were talking, and I would get lost in what was happening, and I was completely confused of what events were taking place. But again, that's not like a huge complaint, but it's just a complaint nonetheless. And I would also say here, also, just to beat around the bush, this is another Connor is just having a little moment here. Some of the author or the audiobook readers pick some really questionable voices and accents for the characters, and it kind of throws me off, because when Trizin was sort of involved in the second book of the Fabius Bile trilogy, he was like in an English accent, and he was like cartoon villain style, which I enjoyed it. But then I read The Infinite Divine, and both of them have like these weird, thick European, Russian-esque accents. And I don't know, I didn't dislike it, but I just thought that was like a super weird choice. And I wasn't the biggest fan. It's not like I hate it, but it was definitely not something I enjoyed either. It was just pretty like, what the hell is going on here? I don't know. That was a me thing, because sometimes when you read a book, you envision how these characters sound, and sometimes the person who's reading does a really good job of emulating what you would assume they sound like, and other times they just sound so off base that it's like borderline on bad. It's teetering on that line of bad but comical. It's like so bad that it's good, or so good that it's, I was going to say so good that it's bad, but that doesn't make sense. So sorry. Those were just some of the things, I really enjoyed, and some of the things I think Warhammer novels can do a little bit better on, but, that's just me. I'm curious, I would also like to hear what you guys think the Warhammer novels really nail, and what they obviously can improve upon. So if you got anything that's really on your mind when it comes to the novels, drop them down in the comments. I always read my comments. I'm always interested in what you guys have to say. And if you like the video, I appreciate it. Other than that, y'all, I am out of here.